Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. I'm Shelly Peters. This is the place to embrace the plant-based life. Today I'm talking potatoes, and I'll tell you why. My roots are actually from PEI, from Prince Edward Island in Canada. Both my parents were born there, and I grew up revering potatoes. We had potatoes at pretty well every single meal. And my mom, a tiny little woman whose name was Bertha, she didn't used to say potatoes, she said puddadas. And so all of my cousins and I used to tease her and say, "Where are the mashed potatoes?" Because she was a bit of a character. Anyway, so I want to talk to you about all the varieties of potatoes, because I can tell you that not everyone is familiar with how to use each different variety of potato, and it really can make a difference. If you want to make potato wedges or French fries versus mashed potatoes, I'm going to help you decide which kind to use. I'm also going to make my favorite gravy on this induction burner, which I have never used before, full disclosure. So we're just going to experiment together. Let me start with describing the potatoes first of all. I'll start with sweet potato. I have a big, huge sweet potato here. There are actually a few varieties of sweet potatoes. I'm not going to get into that right now because I just want you to explore all the varieties that you can. Sweet potatoes are so delicious and such a perfect addition to soups and stews and as a side dish. I usually have at least a couple of baked sweet potatoes in foil in my fridge because they're perfect for me to have beside my salad, on top of rice and beans. I just find it so versatile. And I literally, when I bake them, I don't put anything on them at all. You just open the foil, split the skin. I don't eat the skin. You can if it's organic, I would go ahead and do that. I don't eat the skin. Now I do eat the skin on regular potatoes, which we'll talk about in a minute. But sweet potatoes are incredibly versatile and naturally sweet, and in my opinion, need no additional ingredients to make them super delicious. So sweet potatoes are this variety, and this is a really, really large one. You can get them sort of like fist-sized as well, but this is one of my favorites. And of course, Finney, his food is made partly with sweet potatoes. It's made with lentils. The base is lentils, brown rice, and sweet potatoes, so he loves them too. Now, getting into the regular potatoes, let's start with russet potatoes. They're the ones that have seem to have a little bit of a thicker skin, but they're called russet. And these potatoes are perfect. They're sort of dry and flaky, so they work perfectly for baking. So baking these potatoes is what you want to do, or making French fries or potato wedges. Russet potatoes work the best. What I do, if I'm making potato wedges or French fries, I will cut my russet potatoes into the shape that I want. I don't peel russet potatoes. I give them a good scrub. I try to buy organic, so I don't have to worry about pesticides. And then I will soak the potato wedge, after I've cut them into the wedges or into the French fry shape, I'll soak them in ice cold water a few times, draining off any excess starch that comes out of them, and that just makes your French fries or your potato wedges crispier and even more delicious. Because of course, I mostly bake my potato wedges and my French fries without any oil. You can of course use oil, but if you're trying to avoid it, it's a perfect potato to make potato wedges and French fries from. And again, as you guys know, anybody who follows me, I'm obsessed with baked potatoes. I put everything from hummus, avocados, leftovers on them, chili. I love baked potatoes. I often cook a baked potato and pick them up with the skin and all, and cut them in half and eat them by hand. I love them. They're super delicious because you can top them with so many things, and they're super filling. So it's a perfect food in my opinion. The other kind of potato that would be one that you're familiar with, these potatoes have been sitting around for a little while waiting for me to do this video, so they're growing a little bit at few eyes, but that tells you that your potatoes are alive. They're still growing, so that's a good thing. So these potatoes are yellow flesh. Sometimes they're called Yukon Gold. And these are perfect to mash. They're a little creamier in texture and they create a perfect mash. So I like to use these when I'm doing potatoes, mashed potatoes for, mashed potatoes and gravy. You don't have to peel these, especially if they're organic. Scrub them up really well, and you can actually mash them after you've boiled them with the skin on. Sometimes what will happen when I'm mashing with the skin, some pieces of skin will clump together, and I will pull that part out just because I want it to be a little bit more of a pleasant texture, but I don't worry about peeling them. The peel is full of fiber and nutrients, so you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And then the other potato that you'll often see are red potatoes. These potatoes are really good for any situation where you want the potato to hold its shape. Like for instance, in a casserole or in a soup where you're going to boil the soup for a while and you don't have to worry about the potatoes becoming completely mushy. So that's what you would use the red potatoes for. They make a great potato salad, and anytime you want it to maintain its shape. And then there are some shmancy ones that you don't always often find, and they are purple potatoes. They're really, really good, and they're like red potatoes. They're firmer and they hold their shape. So just use them and experiment with them and see what you like, how you like to use them. So that's kind of a little walk through all the various different kinds of potatoes. And so let's get started on making the gravy so we can have something to put on these potatoes. Let me just move the potatoes out of the way, and I will start by, again, I'm gonna hope this burner works. So this particular recipe, it is still really in the testing phase, but I will be sharing it very, very shortly. I'm probably gonna include it in this video. And I've only made it about 3 or 4 times, so I consider that still to be in the testing phase. So I am not going to use any oil in this gravy at all. I am going to use some fat, so there is a little bit of fat in it. The fat is going to come in the form of almond butter. You can use tahini, but you know what? In this gravy, I've found that I've been testing this one. Like I said, this is about the 4th or 5th time I've made it. The almond butter gives it a nice depth, so give it a try. So once you're cooking your onions off, if they start to stick a little bit, you can always add a little bit of your veg stock. So the ingredients in this particular gravy are onions, veg stock, almond butter, a really good quality dark miso. This is an organic barley miso. You can use any form of miso you like. Miso gives a gorgeous umami flavor, a little bit of saltiness, and it's fermented. So it's just got a really beautiful depth of flavor. And then I used, part of what else I will use is oat milk. That's gonna make it a little bit creamy. There's 1 cup of oat milk in it. And I use brown rice flour to thicken it. And I've got 2 spices going in this. The sage leaf this time. I usually use ground sage. I'm going to try the sage leaf and thyme. So these are 2 of the herbs that I'm going to use to flavor it as well. We're looking a little bit smoky here, but that's okay. I'm going to add a tiny bit of stock into this pot and just cook these onions down. My mom made her gravy with onions. Of course, she didn't make vegan gravy. I'll tell you the story about her when she could no longer eat gravy and how the vegan gravy saved her. I'll tell you that in just a minute. But what I loved about my mom's gravy is she actually left the onions in whole. Now you can, at the end of making this gravy, if your family doesn't like onion bits in it, you can always put it in a high-speed blender and blend it up. I like the richness of this gravy and the little bits of onion. I think it's a really nice, it's got a really nice texture to it. So I leave the onions whole and, or not whole, sorry, they were diced. So just bits of onion. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna add the spices now. And I think I'm testing it out as 1/2 half a teaspoon of thyme, which I tend to rub my thyme between my hands just to really let it release the flavors. And then the sage, I'm going to use a quarter teaspoon of the sage. Just want to make sure it's okay. Yep, looks good. Okay, so that's that. Just going to heat that those herbs up just to let them bloom a little bit, their flavors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the stock. And I have been using this stock, the Better Than Bouillon stock. It does have a fair amount of salt in it if you're trying to avoid salt, or if you have time to make your own stock, that would be even better. That particular stock works really, really well. I like to use a whisk when I start making the gravy because I'm going to eventually whisk in the rest of the ingredients. So I put in 1 tablespoon of almond butter. Let's see if I can get this one out. There's the 1 tablespoon, sorry, of almond butter, and 1 tablespoon of this miso. And I'm going to whisk that in. And that's going to just eventually all melt together and create a really, really lovely flavor base. So I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of the, actually I'm going to get a clean tablespoon for that. I'm going to put two good solid tablespoons of brown rice flour in the jar of oat milk. And this was an old technique that my mom used. She would put she used straight flour. I don't like straight flour to thicken my broth. I just find it a little bit too mealy and I don't like it. My favorite is brown rice flour. I find it makes my gravy really silky and really nice. So you basically are mixing in the brown rice flour with the oat milk, and then gradually adding it to your broth. And we're going to cook it until it's a little bit thicker. And that's as simple as it is. It's that easy and simple to do. The other additions you could make could be black pepper. You could add some black pepper to this. You could add a little bit of tamari would also be nice. This particular recipe, I'm just using these ingredients, and I've been quite happy with the results. Okay, I'm going to let that cook for a minute, and I'm going to talk to you about some of these fancy salts that I have. What I find with a lot of clients I work with is they don't actually taste the food, and I want you to taste it at every opportunity. This gravy is starting to simmer a little bit, so let's just give that a little stir. And one of the important ingredients for me to make sure my food tastes really good is salt. If you're avoiding salt, some salt substitutes can be anything citrus like lemon or lime or vinegar. They will also give you that that good flavor, will boost the flavor similar to what salt will do. But of course I use both sea salt, both fine sea salt and coarse sea salt, depending on what application I'm using. I have a salt grinder, so I use obviously the large coarse sea salt for that. And then I usually have beside my stove, I always have a container of fine sea salt that's good quality that I can quickly add to my pasta water or to boost a recipe. But I also like to experiment with other salts as well. And each salt has its own unique characteristic. This is called Vancouver Island Salt Company, and this is Canadian sea salt. And this is really lovely. It's quite mild, and it's very fine, and I've been really enjoying experimenting with this one. And then a friend of mine, Jane, who some of you may have seen on my videos, she used to do some of my workshops with me. Jane just went on a trip to Portugal, and she came back and kindly brought me this, sea salt from Portugal. And it is just a lovely sea salt. It's got great texture for if you want to put it on to finished dishes. If you want to put it, on a dish where you're going to add a little bit of crunch at the end. It's not super salty in taste, but it gives you a beautiful finish. And then probably my absolutely favorite salt to finish things with. Even, I talk about for my oat bowl, I do a tiny pinch of Malden's sea salt flakes on top of my oat bowl, and it just brings everything together. It's gorgeous. And this is a really gorgeous flaky salt that I highly recommend that you give it a try. It's really wonderful. The other salt that is really nice is Maison Orphée is a brand that is really, they sell a lot of different foodstuffs, and they have a fine gray sea salt, and it's a really lovely salt as well. So that's one you might want to try. And finishing salts are so lovely because, if you've prepared a salad or any kind of a dish where you want to have a nice finishing touch, you can add some of these more specialty sea salts. And then the final one I'll talk about is called black salt, which is not black at all. It's actually a pinky gray, and it's the sulfurous salt that actually acts as the egg flavoring for vegans when you're doing anything like an omelet or maybe a tofu quiche. Black salt is wonderful. It actually has quite a sulfurous smell, but don't be afraid of that. It really does bring a gorgeous balance and really makes your, chickpea egg salad come to life. So try that black salt out as well. That's really good. I got that on Amazon. Yeah, so that's about it. Let's take a look at this gravy. I'll tell you the story now about Bertha, my mom. And so she was obviously a big potatoes and gravy lover. And there were a few years there where she stopped eating gravy. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And then she finally admitted that her gravy was causing her heartburn, and it was quite uncomfortable. So the following Christmas, I encouraged her to try my vegan gravy, and she fell madly in love, and gravy was back in her life again. So she would often ask me to drop off a jar of my gravy so she could have it for the week and enjoy her own, potatoes and gravy and French fries and gravy, and she loved French fries and gravy. So so that was kind of a cool thing that she got to have gravy in the end, because her daughter was vegan and knew how to do a vegan gravy that does not give you heartburn like animal fat does. Okay, so I'm going to do a little taste of this this gravy and just see if there's anything we need. It's lovely, and it's definitely getting a little bit thicker now. Just going to give it a little taste and see what it needs. Oh, it's really good. I think I'm actually going to add a tiny little bit of salt to it. I'm probably going to go ahead and add the Canadian sea salt from Vancouver. Just give a little pinch of it and see what that does. Yeah, and I went to a new vegan grocery store in Hamilton this week called Coven. It is it's on Barton and Sherman. It's actually on Barton, but it's very close to Sherman. And I went in there to explore because I've been eating some incredible cheese from Green Goddess that they sell there. I'll feature some of these Green Goddess cheeses soon once I can get my hands on some. And the shop owner said that he had cheese curds, vegan cheese curds. So I am going to make some poutine with, I'm going to cut this, I'm going to cut some of these russet potatoes up into French fry. I'm going to soak them in some ice cold water, and then I'm going to bake them in the oven, and I'll add a little of these cheese curds on top and a little bit of this gravy. That's going to be an amazing Canadian treat for sure. Anyway, so that's it. So I'll do one more taste on this. I have a very strong suspicion it is tasting delicious now. I just needed a little tiny boost of salt. Oh, it's perfect. It's so delicious. So I encourage you to eat lots of potatoes. They are a perfect food because they are full of nutrients and they're full of fiber, which is going to give you, it's going to fill you up, and you're going to end up eating less calories in the end and having better nutrition. So it's a win-win. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm going to jar this this gravy in a couple of mason jars, and I'm covered for the week. So have yourself a great week. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next week.